Good evening, everybody. My name's Crystal. I'm a jewelry maker, and it's one of my hobbies. And my specialty is working with all things wire. And today I'm going to show you how to do Viking knit. Now, Viking knit is quite pretty. It's old tech. It's about 1,000 years old, possibly as old as 1,200 years. It's very distinctive. It's something that Vikings would have worn quite a bit for jewelry. It's been traded around the world, and it's held up through the rigors of time, surprisingly. Um, just to give you an example, it's quite one of the most versatile things in jewelry making, but it is time consuming. This here that I'm holding, this is triple knit Viking Weave, which has been drawn through a plate and is now about 5 millimeters in diameter. It's hollow through the center, though it's kind of hard to see that. But that's a good thing for some of the applications. Now, for instance, Vikings would have been wearing that sort of snake band like this in bracelets and armbands, in necklaces and the like, and there would be a piece of wire that would be through the center of it to give it some rigidity. Now I've taken how they make Viking knit and I have kind of used it in a more modern application. So this is triple knit Viking Weave that's used as a setting for a cabochon, which isn't quite done yet. This is just a combination of wire weaving, planting beads through it, and it's quite handy. This is double knit Viking Weave, which is a little bit thinner, as in you can see through it a bit more, and I'm in the process of making a set of earrings. But this tutorial I'm going to be teaching you how to do single Viking Weave, which is the easiest to possibly use. So for this tutorial, I know most people have probably bought themselves one of those wire weavers. I prefer to go old school. This is just an old pen that I took apart. This is a piece of wire I put 6 loops on. I've routed through the pen and I've bent around. Now what's important about this is, as I'm weaving and it goes down this barrel, there's going to come a point where I'm going to want to shift it up. So this just keeps the entire thing solid until you're ready to move it up. You just toggle it up and suddenly that can come right off. So it helps you keep your weave on this barrel but allows you to move it off as you're running out of space. So the important tools to Viking knit are quite simple. You need a draw plate. This is just a very simple draw plate. It starts at 8 millimeter and it goes all the way to a millimeter, which is fine. You can get these on Amazon if you want. If you're just starting out and you don't quite understand how wire tension works, I recommend that you get yourself a sewing needle and work with it until you get used to it, because sometimes as you're going along and you're weaving, you will start tightening down till suddenly you can't get underneath this stuff by hand. So sometimes you might need to move some things out of the way. So that's very important. Now for this tutorial I have 3 sets of pliers, and there's a reason for that. I have my flush cutters. These are micro pliers. I have 2 millimeter micro chain nose pliers. These are Zorans. I find them quite good. They're very ergonomic and friendly. And last but not least, these are micro bent nose pliers. These are good for getting out of sticky situations. Now you'll find as you're putting wire through these that your hands are going to get tired, so you're going to want something that's going to be able to pull it out. And last but not least, wire. Wire is really important. I am using Scientific Wire Company's 0.315 millimeter silver plated copper wire. Now, I know a lot of people don't use their stuff because most of the time it's plastic coated. This is actually silver plated, and what's good about it is it's got the flexibility of copper, but it's also got some of the rigidity that's found in silver, and it does not rub off as you're drawing your weave through a draw plate. This is made of that particular wire. You can do it with copper. I would recommend doing it with a softer metal. Harder metal makes it quite brittle. So with that, I realize I've already started this, but it's quite simple really. These 6 loops at the top that I made, they're not exactly even, they don't need to be. We'll see if it actually shows. All you need to do is literally start from the underneath side, go through a loop, bring it back down, go to the next loop, put it in, pull it down. That's exactly what I've done here. Now these are quite long because I know that there's a gap between these loops and on the barrel, which is where I want this to be somewhat flush but not too tight. And then the second way around is effectively what I'm going to be showing you from here on. Now, I know it started and you didn't see how I started, but it's quite simple really. All you do from that point forward, which is, you know, what I'm talking about up here with this up through the loop, back down, over to the next loop, up through the loop, down, over to the next one, so on. So when you get to your second, third, and 500,000th row, which I'm not joking about sometimes, all you're doing, you see these gaps here, you have these lovely gaps in between. All you're doing is a very simple movement. So here, between the very bottom one and the next one up, you're going to slide behind what you see here, in through this gap between the first and the next one up, pull it through, just like so. What's important here is that as you're looping this around, you do not want, because I came in this way, came behind, looped around, and pulled this way. You don't want this bottom loop to go above the loop above it. It's really important because otherwise it doesn't draw through very well. So when you're first starting out, this will seem quite slow. You get the hang of this very quickly. I sit and watch TV sometimes, I listen to documentaries, etc. It's kind of second nature at this stage. You'll pick it up very quick. Now the difference between single Viking knit weave, which is what I'm showing you here, and say double and triple is quite simple, but it has a profound difference in what it looks like. So if I was doing double on my next step, single would be the gap between this bottom one here and the next one above. Double is 2 up and through, and triple obviously is 3 up and behind and down. And your loop as you're going across needs to lay below the last one. Now, it looks completely different. One thing about single Viking knit is that it doesn't get as thick and pretty as it does with this, but it still has its applications. I'm just going to go through this quietly, shut up, show you how I'm doing it as we go along. Try not to let your wire get tangled. Don't be afraid to use pliers if you need to, but do try to be kind of loose with this. Believe me, when it goes through this draw plate and it gets stretched, these loops all slide together and creates this. So it doesn't matter about the gapping between these rows of loops that you see here. It doesn't matter if it's tied across or not. It just makes it easier for you if you're trying to fly through this easily without having to stop every time and put a needle through. So it saves you some time. So I'm going to do this a couple more rows. I'll just show you. And I'm going to go away and get a good chunk of this going so I can show you the next steps with Viking net. Alright, so I didn't start with a very big piece of wire when I started this, and I'm coming to the end. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to show you a couple of useful tools. When you get to a certain stage where you just can't get it into the next row, I can probably get one or two more. This is where the pliers are coming in handy. You either are going to finish off your weave, or you're going to add another piece. Adding another piece can be quite tricky. And this is why I say it's better to work with longer lengths. So I have another piece here that'll work for scrap, just to give you an idea of what you're going to be doing. So on the same row that you finish off, you've looped around, you're dropping straight down. Okay. What you have to do, this is kind of like when you're starting another piece into wire weaving. This bottom hole here that's half formed, you want to stick a piece of wire straight down through like that. You just keep going, but you have to hold this down till you get a couple of loops. So let's say you're holding two tails together, so the end of the first wire and the beginning of the next. You're going to go through just like you have been the entire time. I say this and then I start having trouble with the wire because it's being a little bit squirrely. So you want to hold down those two tails with one finger and draw your wire through, just like it's a continuation of what you did. Now you probably noticed as you were weaving that you're having a little bit of trouble with the wire trying to turn. That's okay, just try to keep it from doing that as much as you can. So after, say, the first one, where you've linked around like this, sorry, just making sure I had that correctly done. You're probably alright. You just want to make sure that your wires are in the correct places, and they are. That's just a big loop at the moment because the one side is down. You just keep going, but it gets really fiddly for that first row when you add one in. So I'm going to keep going, put a couple more rows on this, and I'll show you how to finish it off. Okay, as this is just for demonstration purposes, I am just going to show you what it looks like when you take this off and put it through a draw plate. So let's say you're at your end and you want to pull it off of here. So at the top of this, probably the first thing that you want to do is unbend your wire here and pull it off the container. So you notice now it's this nice pretty loop. Okay. So now, you'll remember when you started off when I was telling you to go up through the loop and back down and up to the next one and back down. What you were doing is you were creating a foundation that the rest of this sits on. But you're also creating an easy way to pull your wire off. Okay, So it's very simple. You're literally cutting this very first loop here off of the copper wire. And you want to do that all the way across. Don't worry, I know it's going to leave you some loose ends, but we'll sort that out in just a minute. So you go through and you cut them off. Just like this. It's a simple thing. Once you get them all cut, it should slide right off like that. I know there's some splayed ends here, that's not a problem. They kind of just fall off because there's nothing else tying to them. And that's fine. That's what you want. And you'll have this little lead wire. That's no bother. You can leave that as it is. So what I find, if I want to get it through a draw plate, this lead wire is quite handy. You can run it through yourself. I take a piece of scrap wire that I have, and you know how there's 6 loops that are standing up here? It's basically the next row down from where you started. The reason you use 6 is because it's a solid number when you're doing stuff like this. So literally all I'm doing is threading this piece of scrap wire through the loop. So I start in one, I go straight across, I go into the one beside it, straight across, just like that. And then on this side, I do the same thing. I'd go through the one next to it and straight across. They don't have to be perfect, okay? What you're doing is you're creating a ability to grab onto something. So all you need to do is fold those up like that, so you have a hold. Okay, fold it down like so, so that it creates a little tail of sort. And you're going to put this through a draw plate. So you always start with the big one. So you look at this, it could be the big one or another big one, but I can tell that I need to go through the largest one first. You literally stick your tail in through here, which I'm going to trim so it's a little bit more even, because I have a bit of a long piece here. Alright, as I was saying, you stick your tail through like so, so that when you flip this over, you can still see that there's a tail. And you take your pliers, you grab a hold like this, and you pull through. Already, that's made a difference to what you had before. So that was through the largest one. Usually it's good to go through twice just to make certain that it wasn't drawn through unevenly. You go to your next size down. Just like this. Again, flip it over, pull. It's getting smaller. Because this is single knit, I'm not too worried about going through twice, but it's good practice to do so. With the double and the triple knit, it becomes kind of critical that you do. So it's starting to take shape. Again, pull through. Good thing about single knit is you can pull this through as fine as you want. Double and triple knit, it gets quite difficult after about 4 millimeters to pull it through. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking about a wire on the inside that you want to do a design with. So I'm just going to keep going with this so I can show you how small this gets, because you can make a chain with this very simple weave. Obviously it gets more difficult as you go on. And we'll go to the next one. I think I might get one or two more. I have seen people get it down to 1 millimeter, and I just don't think I can do that with this, because I think my gauge is just slightly too big in this instance. You have to forgive my light, it's possessed. So as you can see, it's starting to get thinner. I've gone through 8 holes already. Okay, it's getting thinner. We'll keep going until I can't physically get it through. So we're on, it's 1 millimeter, 1.5 to 2.5 millimeter. So I don't break my camera, I had to pull that off screen. So you can see how it's starting to resemble a chain. Now, obviously, if you're getting it that small, you're not going to fit a wire through the center of it, and that's okay. In this instance, I'm just demonstrating to you the use of the draw plate. So I'm going to go up to 2 millimeter. I don't know if we're going to pull this off, but we'll try. Obviously, as it gets smaller, it gets more difficult to draw, so bear with me a moment here. Yeah, it's incredibly flexible. Surprisingly so. So we're going to try 1.5. Wish us luck. I don't know that it'll work, but maybe. This is where things start getting a bit difficult, because the wire, as you're pulling it through a draw plate like this, gains strength, hardness, but it also gets more brittle as it gets harder. So you're basically tempering it. There's a bit of kinetic energy with this. So let me see what I can do. And that's a no. By the way, this is what happens when you get Viking Weave stuck. You just pull it back the way it came. So it cannot go any smaller than that. That is physically all the space there is for this amount of wire. So I'm just going to show this kind of up close, assuming the camera focuses. It kind of resembles when it's single knit like rope weave. You can go smaller on the gauge wire and actually make your chain if you chose to. This would be quite nice. I know it's only a tiny piece here, but that pendant I keep showing off, it would work quite nice as a necklace, a chain for it. But I think in this instance, obviously, it's too small for much of anything. But there you go, that's single knit. Tune in sometime for double knit or triple knit if you really want to know. Have a good evening, guys.